I've photographed over 300 weddings in my career, and I thought I'd seen everything. Nervous grooms, bridezillas, family drama, last-minute disasters. But I had never been in a situation where my camera captured a secret so devastating that it would make me question everything I believed about love, choice, and my own moral obligations. The wedding of Victoria Reed and Peter Russell was supposed to be the pinnacle of my career, a high society event that would establish me among the elite wedding photographers. Instead, it became the day I realized that sometimes the most important picture you take is the one that stops a wedding from happening. Before we begin, I ask you, where are you watching this from? Share in the comments below. And please subscribe for more stories about the moments when ordinary people find extraordinary courage. Now, let me take you back to that perfect spring morning when I learned that sometimes the most beautiful weddings hide the ugliest secrets. My name is Ross Bailey, and I've been a wedding photographer for 8 years. I fell into the profession almost by accident. I was a freelance photojournalist struggling to make ends meet when a friend asked me to photograph her wedding as a favor. I discovered that I had a gift for capturing the intimate moments that make each wedding unique. The nervous laugh of a groom seeing his bride for the first time, the tears in a father's eyes as he walks his daughter down the aisle, the pure joy on a couple's faces as they're pronounced husband and wife. Wedding photography became more than just a job for me. It was a celebration of love in all its forms. I'd photographed beach weddings and barn weddings, elaborate church ceremonies, and intimate backyard gatherings. Each one taught me something new about the infinite ways people choose to commit their lives to each other. The Reed-Russell wedding was different from anything I'd done before. When Victoria Reed's assistant called to book my services, she made it clear that this wasn't just any wedding. This was a merger of two of the most prominent families in the state, a social event that would be covered by society magazines and attended by politicians, business leaders, and old-money aristocracy. "Mr. Bailey," the assistant had said in a crisp, professional tone, "Miss Reed has reviewed your portfolio and would like to hire you for her wedding on May 15th. The budget is unlimited, and we expect nothing less than perfection." The venue was the Reed family estate, a sprawling mansion that had been in the family for 4 generations. When I arrived for the pre-wedding consultation, I was struck by the sheer opulence of the place. Manicured gardens that looked like something from a fairy tale. A ballroom that could accommodate 500 guests and enough staff to run a small hotel. Victoria Reed was everything you'd expect from a society bride. 26 years old, stunningly beautiful, with the kind of poise and elegance that comes from a lifetime of finishing schools and charity galas. She was polite during our meeting, answering my questions about the timeline and her vision for the photos, but there was something distant about her, as if she was going through the motions rather than planning the happiest day of her life. "What's most important to you in terms of the photography?" I asked, a question that usually prompted brides to light up as they talked about capturing their love story. "My father wants comprehensive documentation of the event," she said carefully. "Every guest, every moment, every detail. This wedding represents the joining of 2 important families, and the photographs need to reflect that significance." It was an odd way to talk about her own wedding. Clinical, almost businesslike. Most brides talked about wanting to capture their joy, their love, the emotion of the day. Victoria talked about it like a corporate merger. "And what do you want?" I pressed gently. "What moments are most important to you, personally?" For just a second, something flickered across her face. A vulnerability, a longing, but it was gone so quickly I almost thought I'd imagined it. "I want whatever my father thinks is best," she said finally. The groom, Peter Russell, was exactly what central casting would order for a society wedding. Tall, handsome in a conventional way, with the confidence that comes from never having to worry about money or status. He was pleasant enough during our meeting, but I noticed that he and Victoria barely looked at each other, and when they did interact, it felt more like business partners than lovers. "Ross comes highly recommended," Peter said to Victoria, as if I wasn't sitting right there. "The Whitmore wedding he shot last year was featured in Town and Country." "That's wonderful," Victoria replied, but her tone suggested she was thinking about something else entirely. I left that initial meeting with a strange feeling in my stomach. In 8 years of wedding photography, I'd developed a sixth sense about couples. I could usually tell within minutes whether I was looking at a love story or a disaster waiting to happen. The Reed-Russell wedding felt like neither. It felt like a performance, a poorly one. The morning of the wedding dawned perfect. Clear skies, gentle breeze, the kind of day that makes photographers grateful for their profession. I arrived at the Reed estate at 7 a.m. to begin capturing the preparation process, starting with the bridal suite, where Victoria was getting ready with her bridesmaids. The bridal suite was a flurry of activity. Hairstylists, makeup artists, bridesmaids and matching robes, and enough flowers to stock a florist shop. Victoria sat in the center of it all like a beautiful statue, allowing herself to be primped and polished while maintaining that same distant expression I'd noticed during our consultation. I began taking photos, focusing on the details that would tell the story of the morning: the wedding dress hanging in the window, the delicate jewelry laid out on velvet, the bouquet of white roses and baby's breath. But as I worked, I found myself watching Victoria's face in my viewfinder, and what I saw troubled me. She wasn't glowing with bridal joy. She wasn't excited or nervous or any of the emotions I'd come to expect from brides on their wedding day. She looked resigned, like someone going through the motions of a role she'd been assigned rather than chosen. "Victoria, darling, you need to smile," said one of her bridesmaids, a perfectly coiffed blonde who looked like she'd stepped out of a country club catalog. Victoria's smile appeared instantly, bright and beautiful and completely hollow. I captured it, but something about the falseness of it made me uncomfortable. "Let's get some shots of you with your father," I suggested, knowing that father-daughter moments were often the most emotional part of the morning. Charles Reed was a man who commanded attention the moment he entered a room. Tall, silver-haired, with the kind of presence that suggested he was used to being the most important person wherever he went. He was dressed in an impeccable morning coat and carried himself with the bearing of someone who had never been told no. "My beautiful daughter," he said as he entered the bridal suite, but there was something possessive in his tone that made me look up from my camera. "Hello, father," Victoria said, and I noticed that her entire body tensed when he approached. "Are you ready for your big day?" he asked, placing his hands on her shoulders in what should have been a tender gesture, but I saw through my lens how his fingers pressed into her skin, how she flinched almost imperceptibly at his touch. "Yes, father, everything is exactly as you planned." "As we planned," he corrected, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "This is your day, Victoria, the day you become Mrs. Peter Russell and take your place in society." I took several shots of them together, but something about the dynamic felt wrong. This wasn't a proud father celebrating his daughter's happiness. This was a man ensuring his investment was paying off. "I should go check on the groom's preparations," I said, needing to get away from the strange tension in the room. The groom's suite was a stark contrast to the bridal preparations. Peter and his groomsmen were relaxed, joking around, treating the morning like any other social gathering. Peter himself seemed completely at ease,
adjusting his tie and chatting about golf plans for the following weekend. "Nervous?" I asked as I photographed him getting ready. "Not at all," he said with a confident smile. "Victoria and I have known each other since childhood. This has always been the plan." "The plan?" "Our families have been friends for generations. It makes sense for us to marry. We understand each other's world, our values align, our families approve. It's really quite perfect." He talked about his wedding the way someone might discuss a business merger, which I supposed, in many ways, it was. It was while photographing the groomsmen that I met Logan Russell, Peter's younger brother. Where Peter was conventionally handsome and confident, Logan was more understated, thoughtful eyes, an easy smile, and a warmth that his older brother seemed to lack. "You must be the photographer," Logan said, approaching me while the others were distracted. "I'm Logan, the spare heir." "Ross Bailey. Nice to meet you." "I have to ask, have you met Victoria yet?" "I have. She seems lovely." Logan was quiet for a moment, studying my face. "She is lovely. She's also the kindest, most intelligent woman I've ever known. I just hope—" "What?" "Nothing. Forget I said anything. It's not my place." But the concern in his voice stayed with me as I moved between the bridal and groom's preparations, capturing the traditional getting-ready shots while trying to shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with this picture-perfect wedding. It was during the family photos before the ceremony that I captured the image that would change everything. The formal family portraits were exactly what you'd expect: stiff, posed shots of two prominent families coming together. Charles Reed stood with military posture, his wife beside him looking elegant but cold. The Russell family was equally formal, everyone positioned precisely according to social hierarchy and family importance. But it was during a break between poses that I saw it, a moment of genuine human connection in the midst of all the artifice. Logan had approached Victoria, who was standing slightly apart from the group, looking overwhelmed by the formal proceedings. He said something to her. I was too far away to hear what, and suddenly her entire face transformed. She laughed, a real laugh that lit up her eyes and made her look like a completely different person. For just a moment the mask slipped, and I saw who Victoria really was underneath all the expectations and obligations. I raised my camera instinctively and captured the moment. Victoria mid-laugh, her hand on Logan's arm, both of them looking at each other with an intimacy and warmth that I hadn't seen between her and Peter all day. It was just a split second, and then Charles Reed's voice cut through the moment like a knife. "Victoria, we're ready for the next shot." The light in her eyes died instantly. The mask slipped back into place. She stepped away from Logan and returned to her position in the family formation. But I had seen the truth. I had captured it. As the ceremony time approached, I found myself in an impossible position. I had a job to do: document this wedding, capture the moments that would become the official record of this union. But I also had evidence that the bride was desperately unhappy, that she was being forced into a marriage she didn't want. The guests began taking their seats in the garden where the ceremony would take place. It was a breathtaking setting. Hundreds of white chairs arranged in perfect rows, an altar decorated with thousands of white flowers, a string quartet playing classical music. Everything was flawless, elegant, expensive. I positioned myself to capture the processional, checking my equipment one final time. In 30 minutes, Victoria Reed would walk down that aisle and become Mrs. Peter Russell, and I would document every moment of it. But I couldn't stop thinking about that photograph, the one moment of genuine happiness I'd captured all day. The moment when Victoria had been herself, not the role she was expected to play. I made a decision that went against every professional instinct I had. I found Victoria in the bridal suite, alone for the first time all day. Her bridesmaids had gone to take their positions for the processional, and she was standing in front of a full-length mirror, staring at her reflection with a profound sadness. "Victoria," I said quietly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, and for a moment I saw panic in her eyes. "Is it time? Are they ready for me?" "Not yet. You have a few more minutes." I paused, knowing that what I was about to do could end my career. "I wanted to show you something." I pulled up the image on my camera's LCD screen, the photo of her laughing with Logan. Her breath caught when she saw it. "Why are you showing me this?" she whispered. "Because in all the photos I've taken today, hundreds of them, this is the only one where you look truly happy." Tears began forming in her eyes. "You don't understand. This wedding, it's not about me being happy. It's not about what I want. It's about family obligations, business relationships, expectations that have been in place since I was a child." "But what do you want, Victoria? Not your father, not society, not family expectations. What do you want?" She stared at the photo for a long moment, and I watched as something shifted in her expression. It was subtle, but I recognized it. It was the same look I'd captured in the photograph, the moment when her true self had emerged. "I want to feel like this," she said, touching the camera screen. "I want to laugh like this, to be myself without apology, to choose my own path." "Then why don't you?" "Because I can't. Because this is bigger than me. Because disappointing my father, breaking this engagement, walking away from everything that's been planned, it would destroy everything. Or it would save you." She looked at me with surprise, as if the thought had never occurred to her.
"Victoria," I said gently, "I've photographed over 300 weddings. I've seen real love, and I've seen marriages of convenience. I've seen brides who were nervous, excited, scared, overwhelmed, but I've never seen a bride who looked like she was walking to her own execution." "That's what it feels like," she whispered. "Then don't do it." I can't just not show up. There are 300 guests out there. The ceremony is about to start." "So show up. Walk down that aisle. But when the minister asks if you take Peter to be your husband, tell the truth." She stared at me as if I'd suggested she sprout wings and fly away. "I can't do that. The scandal, the embarrassment, the consequences will be temporary. But marrying someone you don't love, living a life that isn't yours, that's permanent." A knock on the door interrupted us. "Victoria?" It was her father's voice. "It's time." She looked at me one more time, then at the photograph on my camera screen. Something in her expression hardened, not with resignation, but with resolve. "Thank you," she said quietly. The processional began exactly on schedule. The bridesmaids walked down the aisle in perfect formation, followed by the flower girl and ring bearer. The string quartet began the wedding march, and 300 guests rose to their feet. And then Victoria appeared at the back of the aisle, her arm linked with her father's, looking every inch the perfect society bride. But I was watching her face through my telephoto lens, and I could see something different in her expression, a determination that hadn't been there before. She walked slowly down the aisle, her steps measured and deliberate. Charles Reed beamed with pride beside her, nodding to important guests as they passed. Peter waited at the altar with a confident smile. When they reached the altar, Charles Reed lifted his daughter's veil and kissed her cheek. "I'm proud of you," he whispered, loud enough for my microphone to pick up. "I know, Father, but I'm about to make my own choices now." He looked confused, but stepped back to take his seat as Victoria joined Peter at the altar. The minister, a distinguished man who probably officiated at dozens of society weddings, began the ceremony with the traditional words. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Victoria Reed and Peter Russell in holy matrimony." I continued photographing, but my heart was pounding. I had no idea what Victoria was going to do, but I could see the tension in her posture, the way her hands trembled slightly as she held her bouquet. The ceremony proceeded normally through the readings and the exchange of rings. Peter's vows were polished and appropriate, speaking of partnership and shared values and building a future together. When it was Victoria's turn, she spoke about commitment and family and duty, words that sounded beautiful, but felt hollow. And then came the moment of truth. "Peter," the minister said, "do you take Victoria to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death you do part?" "I do," Peter said confidently. "Victoria," the minister continued, "do you take Peter to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death you do part?" The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Victoria looked at Peter, then at her father in the front row, then at the sea of expectant faces watching her. Finally, her gaze found Logan, standing among the groomsmen, and I saw her draw strength from whatever she saw in his eyes. "No," she said clearly, "I don't." The collective gasp from 300 guests was audible, even over the sound of my camera shutter. Peter's face went white with shock. "Victoria, what are you doing?" he whispered urgently. But Victoria had found her voice, and she wasn't whispering anymore. "I'm telling the truth," she said, turning to face the assembled guests. "I'm telling the truth that I should have told months ago, years ago. This marriage isn't about love, it's about business, about family expectations, about maintaining social status and financial partnerships." Charles Reed was on his feet now, his face purple with rage. "Victoria, stop this nonsense immediately!" "No, Father, I won't stop. I won't pretend anymore." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "I've spent my entire life being the perfect daughter, following the perfect plan, preparing for the perfect marriage to the perfect man. But none of it is perfect if it's not what I choose." She turned back to Peter, and I could see genuine regret in her eyes. "Peter, you're a good man, and you deserve someone who loves you completely. But that person isn't me. We both know this marriage was arranged by our families, and we both know we're settling for convenience rather than love." "Victoria, please," Peter said, but there was relief in his voice, along with the embarrassment. "We can discuss this privately." "No more private discussions. No more planning my life in boardrooms and country clubs." She pulled off her engagement ring and placed it gently in his hand. "I'm sorry for the embarrassment, for the expense, for the disruption. But I'm not sorry for choosing my own life." The garden erupted in chaos. Guests were on their feet, talking in shocked whispers. Charles Reed was pushing through the crowd, clearly intending to drag his daughter away from the altar. Mrs. Reed had fainted and was being attended to by several society ladies. But Victoria wasn't finished. "I know this is shocking," she said, her voice carrying over the commotion. "I know this isn't what anyone expected, but I hope that someday some of you will understand that choosing your own happiness isn't selfish, it's necessary." She looked directly at Logan then, and the smile that crossed her face was the same one I'd captured in that photograph, genuine, radiant, free.
And I hope that when I do get married someday, it will be to someone who makes me laugh, who sees who I really am, who loves me for myself rather than for what I represent." With that, she gathered up her dress and walked back down the aisle, not as a bride walking toward her future, but as a woman walking toward her freedom. The aftermath was everything you'd expect from a scandal of this magnitude. Charles Reed was apoplectic, threatening lawsuits and social ruin. The Russell family was mortified, but trying to maintain their dignity. Guests were either fleeing the scene or clustering in groups to dissect what they'd just witnessed. I continued photographing it all, knowing that these images would tell a story unlike any wedding album I'd ever created. But the most important moment came as Victoria reached the back of the garden. Logan had broken away from the wedding party and was walking toward her, his face full of concern and something that looked very much like love. "Victoria!" he called out. She stopped and turned, and when she saw him approaching, her face lit up with that same radiant smile. "Are you okay?" he asked when he reached her. "I'm better than okay. I'm free." "What will you do now?" "I don't know. For the first time in my life, I have no plan, no expectations, no predetermined path. It's terrifying and wonderful."
Logan reached out and took her hand. "Would you like some company while you figure it out? Are you sure? Your family will never forgive you for choosing me over them." "That's the only thing I'm sure of." I captured that moment too. Victoria and Logan, hands clasped, looking at each other with the kind of love that I'd spent 8 years trying to photograph at weddings. It was real, honest, unguarded. As they walked away together, leaving behind the chaos of the ruined wedding, I realized I had just documented something far more meaningful than a society marriage. I had captured a woman finding her courage, choosing her own path, and discovering real love in the process. The scandal dominated society pages for months. Charles Reed disowned Victoria publicly, though I heard through mutual acquaintances that he eventually came around when he realized that his daughter's happiness mattered more than his business relationships. The Reed-Russell business merger fell through, but both families survived the financial disappointment. Peter, it turned out, was more relieved than devastated. Within 6 months, he was dating a woman he'd met at his country club. Someone who shared his interests and values, and actually wanted to marry him. As for me, I thought my career in high society wedding photography was over. Who would hire the photographer who had encouraged a bride to run away at the altar? But I was wrong. Word spread about what had happened, and I began receiving calls from a different kind of client. Couples who wanted a photographer who cared more about capturing truth than maintaining appearances. My business actually grew, and I found myself working with people who valued authenticity over perfection. A year after the Reed-Russell wedding that never was, I received an unexpected phone call. "Ross? This is Victoria. Victoria Reed. Well, actually, soon to be Victoria Reed-Russell, but not in the way anyone expected." "Victoria, how are you?" "I'm wonderful, truly wonderful, and I'm calling because Logan and I are getting married next month, and we'd love for you to photograph our wedding." "I'd be honored. It won't be anything like the last wedding you were supposed to photograph for me. We're having it in Logan's backyard, maybe 50 guests, very simple and casual, but it will be real this time. Those are the best kind of weddings to photograph." The wedding of Victoria Reed and Logan Russell was everything the first one wasn't. Small, intimate, joyful, and absolutely genuine. Victoria wore a simple white dress she'd bought off the rack, Logan wore a suit he already owned, and they exchanged vows they'd written themselves. But the photographs from that wedding were some of the most beautiful I'd ever taken, because they captured something that no amount of money or planning can create. Two people who had chosen each other freely, completely, and without reservation. In my favorite photo from that day, Victoria is mid-laugh, her head thrown back with pure joy, while Logan looks at her with an expression of wonder and love. It's the same genuine happiness I'd captured in that first photograph, the one that had given her the courage to choose her own path. That photo sits framed in my office now, a reminder that sometimes the most important thing a photographer can do isn't just capture what's happening, it's help people see who they really are. Victoria and Logan have been married for 3 years now. They live quietly, away from the society spotlight that had once defined Victoria's life.
They're happy in a way that has nothing to do with social status or family approval, and everything to do with the choice they made to build a life based on love rather than expectation. And every year on their anniversary, they send me a photo. Not a professional one, just a simple snapshot of the two of them together, still laughing, still choosing each other, still free. An absolutely powerful story about the courage to choose your own path and the unexpected ways that truth can set us free. What do you think of Ross's decision to show Victoria that photograph before her wedding? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this incredible story about finding the courage to choose love over obligation, please show your support by hitting that like button, and be sure to subscribe for more inspiring stories that celebrate authentic human connection. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.